In 1981, an aphid specialist, H.L.G. Stroyan, speculated that Californian aphids found here at the Royal Botanical Gardens, Kew, had arrived from the United States on a transatlantic aircraft. Stroyan doesn't specify how he thinks the aphids reached the garden, but Kew lies some 5 kilometres east of London, Heathrow, which is somewhere in that direction, and is routinely overflown. Could it be that the aphids had stowed away in the wheel bay, the cavity into which the aircraft's landing gear retracts during flight, and tumbled out into the temperate air above the gardens when the wheels were extended in preparation for arrival? Whether or not they arrived in this way, the very possibility draws attention to the potential of the wheel bay as a vehicle for global transfer. It also highlights its capacity as a repository of materials gathered from corners around the globe. For if not aphid, then surely other passengers. Discoveries in these areas could have implications for an accurate mapping of the airport boundary. And insofar as the transfer of organisms and matter shapes the natural world, they would have implications for the history of landscaping, and where displacement poses a risk to ecology, they could shape the evaluation of aviation in these terms. This presentation reports on an art research project that has taken up such themes. Begun in 2017, it draws on qualitative data of narrative and hearsay, on architectural techniques, and on data collection by means of forensic science. Its critical and historical frameworks are art and spatial and materialist theory. If the aphids fell from the sky, it follows that the wheel bay was at the centre of the incident. The process was played out through its material configuration and spatial trajectories. Accordingly, in the same way that a groom might examine the latch, the hinge of the gate from which the proverbial horse has bolted, we should take a good look at the wheel bay if we want to know what happened. A primary objective of the inquiry at the outset was to set in motion a process of de-abstraction. The idea was to give agency, empirical mass, realism even, to the vagaries of the unseen and unexperienced. I would need to gain local, real-time experience of the wheel bay cavity and establish first-hand a sense of the space in which matter is transported. Size, shape, distance from the ground. Related to this was the experience that was the thought that the experience of being there might act as a catalyst for thought. From the artist's studio to Heidegger's hut, there has always been a relationship between thought and the environments in which ideas are born. On March the 15th, 2019, these ambitions took me to an aircraft boneyard in the Cotswolds, England, where I inspected the wheel bay of Etihad Airways Boeing 777-A6 LRC. Perched inside, I revisited my thoughts on the aphids at Kew. As the plane had gathered speed for takeoff, the insects would have found themselves drawn up by displaced air and driven inside, where, as the undercarriage retracted and the doors closed, they were temporarily housed. Accompanying the aphids would have been the air on which they rode, as well as the host of other airborne matter. Fellow insects, seeds, moisture, dust, particulates, pollen and aeroplankton. Mosses, microbes such as viruses, fungi, bacteria, protists, liverworts. In sum, the wheel bay functions as a capsule in which a host of organic and inorganic matter of unimaginable variety is routinely collected, sealed in upon retraction of the landing gear, and transported to a distant location. The wheel bay walls were caked with a yellow sludge, comprising grease and a layer of dust, about 1 millimetre thick. Like insects to flypaper, the dust adhered to this, forming over the aircraft's lifespan a residue of all the matter picked up at the airport that is not blown away by the force of the air. In this way, matter assumes the role of witness to the otherwise unseen and unquantified material transported in the compartment. With time, the wheelbay is rendered a uniquely articulated environment, a microcosm of the planetary one, which its movements have helped create. If the analogy is pursued to its logical conclusion, it becomes clear that the Earth has no stable coordinates, but is an incessantly shifting and regrouping body of matter. And surely, if crouched inside a wheelbay, no extant definition of place could accommodate the material evidence of one's location. In The Lamp of Memory, the 19th century artist and social reformer John Ruskin contends that soot and grime on buildings constitute a time stain that is integral to its proper understanding. He writes, "It is in that golden stain of time that we are to look for the real light and colour and its preciousness of architecture." Time, he seems to suggest, is made material, and this materiality gives us access to a set of spatial and temporal relations that are otherwise lost. Similar thoughts are developed in the Ethics of the Dust, where, through lessons on minerals, he probes the relationship between humans and the environment. The student, radically reduced in scale, is transported, Alice-like, through a wondrous landscape of crystals, precious stones, and particles ordinarily overlooked. Ruskin's geological imagination is very much a synecdochal one, whereby it simultaneously conceives of the part and the whole, so that in a back-and-forth motion, the world on one scale is used to constitute and comprehend the other. Thus, the microscopic crystal landscape has immeasurable cultural value, disclosing the interplay of time, space, matter, and humans. Comparisons between mineral relations on the microscopic scale, codependencies, rivalries, collaborations, stand in for other, observable, at the scale of the human, and vice versa. As described by Ruskin, the landscape is routinely ruined by human activities. Crystals get mixed with clay, soot and minerals, in whose company they do not naturally occur, are destroyed, and also by cleaning when crystals dissolve in water. Through these visionings, he constructs a history of the Earth and a spectrum of relations, intrahuman, human and architectural, human and Earth, physical and metaphysical. Ruskin's muddied crystals and sooty walls provide a scheme within which to think the sludge in the wheelbay. It too is suggestive of geological strata, only anthropogenic in origin and containing a radically different time signature. It lends itself too to the reciprocal figuring of part and whole, discrete and connected objects, local and global scales, human and geological time. To empirically ground these ideas, I teamed up with geologist Andreas Hahn to conduct a microstratigraphic survey of its surfaces. There is just time to report on some of Hahn's findings. His forensic investigation reported the following. Mafic and felsic minerals, a dominance of sub-rounded grains, speaking against a predominance of aeolian materials such as desert sands. Podrocarpus pollen, which is widely distributed in the tropics and subtropics across Africa, Asia, Australia, Central and South America, and several Pacific islands. And glass beads, uniform in shape, and each measuring approximately 6 micrometers in diameter. These are the reflective agent used in airport runway marking. They were present in all samples, suggesting the wheelbay houses many thousands. Their discovery brings to attention a further constituent of the material fusion that takes place in the wheelbay, as well as further material entity dispersed in the air through aircraft movement. This much we know. They are dislodged from the emulsion that fixes them to the runway by the force of accelerating or braking aircraft tires, and once loose, are drawn into the aircraft in the manner of the other matter and dispersed again in the same manner as other particles. As they descend through the air in proximity to airports, they are readily integrated into the respiratory and digestive systems of living organisms, contributing to an invisible and unauthorized form of biopolitics, whereby life forms find themselves altered by the activities of the state or the industry that it sanctions. Their discovery adds force to a moving body of evidence of the fouling of a shared and finite planetary resource by private enterprise. In natural history terms, the flow of planes in and out of the airport are contributing to the formation of a new landscape, a new species intermingling in the vicinity of airports. The analogy of the river may be useful in comprehending this evolution, because one aspect of what is being steadily produced is a new sedimentary layer that starts at about 5 kilometers from the airport and becomes increasingly more concentrated towards the runway. In his book Thames Sacred River, Peter Ackroyd notes, "The river contains its beginning within its end." The same may be said of the flight path. Another analogy might be the planetary garden. According to this concept, the planet can be thought of as one vast garden, a privileged site in which species are brought into contact with each other through human activity. New habitats, colonies, biomes are developing. The western corn rootworm, indigenous to North America, is now found widely in the vicinity of European airports. But the true planetary gardener is committed to planetary flourishing. Human well-being depends on it and acts with due care and responsibility. The garden is finite, life precious and precarious. As we have seen, the wheelbay is no horticulturalist. Species incapable of cohabitation are carelessly thrown together, and the gardener's dinner is at risk. At Windsor, just a few kilometers west of the airport, the western corn rootworm has been found eating the Queen's crops. As I tell this story, humanity is in the grips of a global pandemic. A new strain of virus, SARS-CoV-2, capable of infecting humans, has been transported from its breeding ground in Wuhan, China, to all corners of the globe. The virus has necessitated changes in the spatial relationships between bodies, unprecedented in human memory. Public life has had to be reinvented. The landscape has been radically transformed. The virus, of course, travels by air. Droplet-borne, it rides on the bodily fluid, until entering a new host. Preliminary research suggests that the same fluid has a habit of sticking to PM10 particulates. That's air pollution, and this may enable it to travel further. Martinelli writes that atmospheric PM has a sublayer that facilitates the viral survival in airflows for hours or days, and infection rates are higher in more polluted areas. And then, as each infected body is transported by plane from one country to the next, it is spread around the globe. The pandemic landscape is an aviation landscape par excellence. It seems fitting then that this project is being presented in the context of a global lockdown. The virus has forced upon this landscape what Kew's aphid infestation only forecast. Air travel, other than for the purposes of freight and repatriation, has all but halted. Here at Heathrow, verges are growing unchecked and empty shuttle buses prosaically trundle around the melancholy parking lots. What of the glass beads? By virtue of their size, their impact on the landscape is harder to detect. But for sure, as these freshly crafted ornaments are spilled carelessly around the grounds of the estate, they'll be leaving a fluorescent trace. At present, this is visible only if the soil is inspected under a microscope. With time, though, it promises to become stronger and brighter. Perhaps it'll be thought of as land art, something in the order of the Neolithic henges and stone circles. Perhaps one night it will even come to guide observers of the Anthropocene to the sites where Heathrow's runways once lay.